Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, everybody. It's so wonderful to be with you. What a special space to get to be a part of. As Mark said, I'm Rabbi Adina Allen. I'm the founding rabbi and president of Jewish Studio Project. For those who are new to JSP, it's about cultivating creativity as a Jewish spiritual practice. So just very aligned and kindred spirits with IJS. So what I want to share a little bit of thinking about this time after Shavuot, and I've been thinking a lot about revelation, and not only revelation as this one-time moment that happened at Sinai, but revelation as an ongoing human experience in which we are constantly being made and undone and remade by our encounters with the world. And the way that our system, our mind, our body, our heart, our breath is able to take in those experiences and metabolize them. The need for process and integration and deepening and expansion to happen from those insights. And I think I think we can probably all agree, especially now in a time of such stark binaries and so much polarization and so much pressure to flatten reality into easy categories of either or, right and wrong, in and out. Amidst the hardship of this time, I really think this moment is asking something of us and inviting us into new forms and postures and perceptions. And I believe it's asking us to become a people who are practiced in the art of oscillation. So inhale and exhale, of giving and receiving, of speaking and listening, the act of reaching outward and then returning inward, right? In Hebrew, we have this phrase, ratzov vashov, of holding seeming opposites as truth, that the world is ever dying and the world is ever being reborn, and learning to discern which posture is needed when. So, as we prepare for our meditation in a few moments, I wanted to offer just a little vignette from an experience I had just the other week about revelation and the both and nature of reality and wisdom and Torah and truth, if that's okay. So, a few weekends ago, I was among the redwoods. I live in Northern California in the Bay Area, and I was walking, taking a silent meditative hike at dusk. If anyone has been out at that liminal hour, you know how special it is when the world starts to soften at its edges. And the trail was climbing upward toward the ridge, and the sun was making that final offering of color. There was this like gold on the horizon that started to dissolve into lavender and rose. And then the mountains looked like they were lit from within. And the sky was just big and vast, vast enough to hold everything. And from the height of that ridge, you could see for miles. And I was thinking of the way that this is sort of mountaintop wisdom, high above the clouds, above it all, peak moment revelation. Um, I have to say, there was this certain cloud that formed above one of the mountains, and it looked like the Shekhinah, like the divine indwelling presence, sort of like twirling above a mountain. It was very sacred. So we have these experiences, right? The kind that expand the lungs and that widen the field of vision and that remind us of how impossibly vast the world is. And I was filled with that feeling of like Malo kol haaretz kevodo, the whole world is filled with divine glory, stretching out into infinity. And then the light began to fade, and my hiking companion and I began to descend to go back down towards camp. And as the sun set, the world shifted even deeper into that blue-gray sky time, where it started to become difficult to tell where one thing ended and another thing began. Dawn or fading daylight in that same hour sort of mixed up. And the path ahead became difficult to discern. And you really had to feel into the steps. They had to be more felt than known with the mind. And when I tried to think too hard, maybe you've had this experience, my footing would falter and I'd trip. So, really learning to trust into the body and knowing that the body in this moment seemed to understand before the mind did. And we descended further, and the air grew cool and damp. And that sound of rushing water, there was a ravine. It began to emanate from below. this river moving through and feeling that like cool life pulsing in the depths where salmon were swimming and finding their way home through currents older than memory. And I found myself feeling really deeply how Torah lives here too, right? It's not only in the fantastic flashes found at the summit and all that that represents, but also down in the valley's depths and all that the depths hold. So, not only in moments of clarity or transcendence or vast vistas, but in the quieter places too, where we can't see clearly, the places where we have to feel our way forward, the places where something beneath the surface is still moving and still carrying life. In this beautiful poem by Yehuda Halevi, he writes, Ata Yoshev Kruvim, Ata Shochen Shechakim. You dwell among the angels, your abode is in the clouds. So God, yes, is high up there. And yet we have other verses like Ke'etz Shatul al Mayim, Torah, wisdom, God, like a tree planted by water that sends forth its roots towards the stream. So perhaps revelation, perhaps wisdom, perhaps Torah, truth, live really in the oscillation is really what I wanted to offer today. The oscillation between these places, between the mountain peak and the river valley, between the wide expanse and the hidden root system below, between the clouds and the streams, the heights and the depths, the clarity and the mystery, breath entering and breath leaving. And that perhaps it's not about having to choose one or the other, but really about the movement between these two, how one calls out for the other, mirrors, echoes, needs, calls for the other. Torah can arrive in flashes of brilliance, or it can come to us quietly beneath the surface and slowly reshape us like water shaping stone. So perhaps what we're meant to be taking in these days following Shavuot, following Revelation, is learning how to not feel forced to choose between one or the other, but learn how to move between the two, really with a sense of tenderness and reverence and openness and ease, and to trust that two things, many things can be true at once, giving and receiving, speaking and listening, reaching outward, returning inward, Ratso Vashov. The world is dying and the world is ever being reborn. We breathe in and we breathe out. So, with that, and with that imagery, and hopefully having invited the more than human world into this space with us, I want to invite us to start to move towards our meditation for today. And you are invited to enter this space however feels most comfortable and aligned for you in this moment. You might want to sit with your eyes closed. You might want to invite yourself into some gentle movement. And since my practice of meditative work is really through art, I will also invite you into that. So if you have any simple materials on hand, even like a scrap paper and pen or pencil, you're very much invited to use those materials during this time. I'm going to put on some meditative quiet music for our sit today, and I will tilt my screen so you can see my hands moving. And at Jewish Studio Project, that's part of our practice. So if anyone else would like to tilt your screen to see your hands moving, you're welcome to. And I'll just invite, if you do choose to use materials, I'll just share the few simple rules of our studio process, which is to follow pleasure, follow the movement of the breath, follow energy, follow what feels good in the moment without having to determine what it looks like or if it's good, surrendering that sense of comment and judgment, and just even letting the materials move on the movement of your breath and seeing how the breath becomes energy made visible on the page. Does that sound okay to everyone? Just look around. Okay, wonderful. So I'll invite us to get set up for meditation now. Again, entering however you would like, seated in your chair, laying down with movement in your body. If you want to grab some simple materials, feel invited to do that now. I will share the screen, share my music, and if you'd like to mute it and have quiet, please feel free to do that. And I'll bring us back together in about 10 minutes. Please put any questions that you have in the chat. We'll have a few more minutes here in meditative practice and just invite you, if you've lost that connection to your breath, take a moment now to reground and refind it, letting that exhale be really deep. Maybe letting your shoulders drop. If you're working with materials, maybe re-letting yourself find your way back into pleasure, to play, to relaxation. We'll have another few minutes here. Over the next few moments, we'll start to find that comfortable or uncomfortable pausing place for now. If you've been working with materials, if you've been sitting or moving, starting to find your way back into community, into this space together. If you've been sitting, maybe just wiggling fingers or toes or placing a hand somewhere softly on your body. Taking a deep breath in and a full breath out. And I'll share our practice that we do at Jewish Studio Project as a way to close this part of our space. Invite you, if it feels okay for your body, to bring your hands together and just rub them together to make a little friction, a little heat, a little energy. And then let's take those hands again, place them somewhere on your body, sending in prayer and blessing and healing and the merits of your practice. May they sink deep into your bones, into all parts of you, and nourish and sustain you throughout this day. One more time, rub those hands together. And then let's send that energy outward towards one another, towards this incredible community that's gathered here and not in real time, who will be gathering and taking in the merits of this practice, sending energy of blessing out to one another. And then one last time. And then sending that energy far beyond the reaches of this Zoom and this virtual space to all of the people, all of the places most in need of healing and blessing and this energy that we've generated together. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Adina. Really a special offering today. So grateful to you. Thank you so much. Friends, we seal the practice as we do each day. We offer an opportunity for those of you who are in mourning, or if you're observing a yurt site, or if it's your custom to join in the mourner's Kaddish, to do so. If you're not reciting Kaddish, we encourage you to stay present to support those who are for a few moments. Thanks to Harry for sharing the words on the screen. And if you're joining me, please rise in body or in spirit. And if you like, you can unmute at this time. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Meraba, Yama, Dibra, Hirute, Biamlich, Malkuke, Chaye Chom, Yomechom, Chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Ankari, Ru, Amen. Hey, Yehi Shabbat Rabba Mevarach, Leolam, Lame, Amaya. Barach, Yishtabach, V'yitzhar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yitalev, V'yithalal, Shemay Deku, V'nafsku, V'ela, Min Kol, Birchata, V'shirata, V'shirata, V'nechamata, V'amiran, V'alma, V'imru, V'yehi Shalom Rabba, Maya, V'chaim, Aleinu, V'chol Yisrael,
God grant abundant
Amen.
Shalom.
Shalom V'ramav,
Amen.
Uya
Shalom,
Shalom.
God,
Israel, Ya'kol Yoshvei Tevel, Imru, Amen.
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 Friends, thanks so much for joining us today. And everyone is welcome to stay on for a conversation with Rabbi Adina Allen, or if you'd like to, of course, you're more than welcome to turn off the sound on your device and continue to use the support of this community to engage in your own practice for the next 15 minutes or so. Thanks to Harry Gilboa for holding us with skill and grace as always. And if you're leaving us now, hope you'll join us tomorrow to sit into Shabbat with Rabbi Susan Leiter. We'll be leading our sit tomorrow, and we'll be back next week, of course, Monday through Fridays on our regular schedule. So if you have a question you'd like to ask Rabbi Adina, please put it in the chat and I'll try to work it into the conversation. You're welcome to share reflections on your experience of the practice today, etc. And Harry will share links to all the different things that people requested. I'm going to I will throw into the mix. Here's a link to that Yehuda Halevi poem that Rabbi Adina shared, which is just perfect. We'll talk about that in a moment, maybe. Yehuda Halevi, an early medieval great Hebrew poet, and we'll share the music, etc. All right. Well, first of all, Dina, since it's your first time leading us here, thank you so much. And also, it feels like it's important to just describe a little bit about the Jewish Studio Project is not just an organization, it's also a process and a methodology. And for some people here, it might have been not new. For some people, it might have been very new. So I wanted to, in the limited time we have, wanted to see if you could give us kind of your, let's say it's a 20-story elevator ride that you've got to explain what is the Jewish Studio Project's process.
Sure. Thanks so much. Thank you so
And then
much,
we can
Adina.
talk about the oscillation. I want to talk about that.
Yeah, great. Amazing. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for inviting some art into the space. So the Jewish Studio process is a methodology that combines a practice developed by my mom, Pat Allen, who's a leader in the world of art therapy. She created something called the open studio process that I grew up with, creating in her studio in our house growing up and in the community art studios she formed. And it's a process that's now used all over the world and has been adapted to many cultural contexts from Taiwan to Mexico to Turkey, and beyond. It's a very simple process of intention setting, which you all are very familiar with. You set an intention, you move into exploratory art making with any materials, any medium, and then you do a practice called witness writing, which is really just free writing in response to the piece and the process, and what arose. Jewish Studio Project has combined that with Beit Midrash, with the Jewish practice of textual learning as a way to bring the intellect into that experience. So in the full Jewish Studio process, you're looking at text, you're exploring in chavruta, in paired learning, you're discussing, and then you're moving into this intention setting, art making, and writing practice to see what happens when the material that's been stirred up can drop down into the other parts of self, and mix with our intuition, imagination, memory, other ways of knowing. That's a brief.
That's an excellent elevator description. I think we only got it to the 11th floor there. I'm putting in the chat also from the Jewish Studio Project's website, also description of Adina, and um, also makes the connection between creativity as a force for healing, connection, and social transformation. So um, plenty to explore on their website. So I want to talk a little bit also about the theme you brought in for us for our practice today, which is I think there's like a central theme of Jewish spirituality or a motif, if you prefer, of paradox of holding opposites. In your description, that was a wonderful description of your dusk hike and about kind of discovering revelation and wisdom in the uh, down below, right, in the ravine and in the enveloping darkness, right, where we can't see, versus as opposed to peak experiences. And you referenced Ratzova Shov, which I don't remember which prophet that is, but that's from one of the prophets, right? Do you happen to know offhand? No? Okay. Well, that's why we have the internet, so we can look that up. But there's that. But there's also this great Jewish mystical theme of Yerida Tzorech Aliyah, of descending for the sake of ascent. And it just strikes me so much that waves are such an important central metaphor for how our tradition, our heritage understands the nature of spirituality. And it's not just, linear in a linear way, kind of riding the ups and downs, but it's also, as you were describing today, it's holding both. So there was a question in the chat. I don't know if you're comfortable doing so, but if you are, to maybe unpack a little bit about what emerged for you, that we, for those of us who were practicing and also practicing, by in a way, kind of meditating with your process, right? Watching what you were doing and what emerged. Because it's interesting, everyone's got their take, right? So I saw the both and in what came out there. Not just you started with the oscillations, but then there was much more than that.
Totally.
Are you comfortable sharing about that?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. And
Yeah.
I will say that a lot of my work is on Zoom, so I'm doing art throughout Zoom meetings, so this piece will also this is just like the beginning, it'll continue to evolve. Here's one that is maybe more towards like completion from the other day.
Wow.
And I think what really helps me about using materials on the page and thinking about oscillation is the like, I love it, I hate it, it's horrible, I've ruined it, and now something else is emerging. And if anyone has ever worked with materials, I'm sure you've felt the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And getting to see something continually evolve, like literally in front of you, as opposed to just having to sense it in myself, to take that and like see it outwardly reflected, and to
Mm-hmm.
know that like something that I hate, that I feel like I've ruined, if I continue to bring my sustained attention and creativity to it, there's always a place where it can shift and change and open into something new. Um, and so, we stopped at a random place. It certainly isn't done. And even that is a practice, right? Of having to say, come to a comfortable or uncomfortable pausing place, like we have to do in life. But really
Mm-hmm.
feeling the oscillation of love, hate, of it's beautiful, it's ruined, of I feel energy for this, I don't, and staying with it.
I like that very much. And the other thing about the depths, and there's a question in the chat also, and I want to make sure I've got the question right. Is where do you find the oscillation between the roots in the depth and the expansiveness in your own life? What are some of the ways you'd encourage to find that for ourselves, especially when we may not feel the roots in the depths? I think that I understand. Want to make sure I got the question right, but I think it has to do with experiencing spirituality in the depths, and the depths can be those beautiful depths of the ravine that you're describing, but they also can be like the places of extreme constriction, of pain, of struggle, right? Where it's especially challenging in the constriction. That's another metaphor too. The expansiveness and constriction is another way of describing it. But in that constriction, so then the question becomes for you, what is helpful for you? I mean, you found beauty in the depths in that ravine, right? but in other depths, which are not, which, where the beauty may not be quite so apparent, what's your suggestion, if you have one, about um, finding the roots of the spirit there? Or how do you work with, I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting because your mom, you're describing the origins of this, and your mom as an art therapist, which I imagine was very much directed at working towards healing of those painful aspects, whether it's trauma or deep pain or, kind of where it's not possible, where it's much harder to witness anything, right?
Yeah, and I think it's not just healing, but learning to befriend and learn from those
Mm-hmm.
places. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of the we sort of have five foundational texts of Jewish Studio Project, and one is Tohu Vavohu, creation comes from chaos and void, and thinking about, right, tell me if it gets too loud here, I'll move.
Mm-hmm.
God's creative process in shaping the world, we often think of it coming from nothing, but actually we read Haaretz haita tohu vavohu, and the earth was chaos and void, and that is where all of creation comes from. God bringing God's creative energy, Breshit bara, that bara creative energy, to the tohu vavohu, to the chaos and void, and shaping the world from that. So thinking about that as an invitation and blessing and teaching for all of us of when we bring our creative energy to the tohu vavohu, the darkness, the depths, the murky, the
Mm-hmm.
unseen, the chaos and void, which is, what pair of words could better describe the last however many years we've been living in. That is where new worlds are born. And so we are B'Tselem Elohim. We're created in the image of the divine creative force who does just that. And I think that is our blessing and invitation and our task on this.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful response. And I think, part of what I get there is also recognizing that state and holding it with tenderness, and the practice at the very end that you just shared with us, of rubbing the hands together and applying that to the body, right, as a self-compassion, as a form of holding all of that, the peaks and the valleys with tenderness is so much part of it. So here's a question, which I'm sure you get pretty much constantly, from Lori. Thank you for this practice. I am plagued by the core belief that I'm a terrible artist with no artistic ability whatsoever. Okay. So hopefully we're going to have you back, Adina, and we'll do this again, and everyone will have a chance to put this into practice. And maybe also people will be a little bit more prepared, maybe to have material, we can prepare people to have materials ready if they want to opt into that aspect of the practice, right? Um, I intellectually know the words to talk myself out of this in a non-judgmental, expressive, non-performing environment, but I literally cannot make myself put pen or crayon to paper for this practice. Any guidance? Okay, so what do you say?
Oh my goodness. I think that like the core of our work maybe is like pastoral care around creative trauma, which I think is something every single
Hmm.
person starting from a very young age in this culture has, which is just, it's so intense, right? And just to validate that all of us, I think, in some way feel that whether it was, stand in the back of the room for the dance, like, you're in the dance troupe, you're in the back, or mouth the words in choir, or your paper isn't
Hmm.
hung on the wall, or your sister's the creative one, not you. And just to say, like, deeply, I think, again, I take this from Breshit, from Genesis, that we are all created in the image of the divine creative force, and that we are all created creative.
Hmm.
Creativity is innate in who we are as human beings, and it is the seat of our deepest power. And there are many ways to touch our creativity and to bring our creativity to the world, right? The way you plan a board meeting, the way you schedule a family vacation, the way you make dinner, right? There's so many forms. And I think that art materials are a very powerful and potent form to access that creativity. And at JSP, our work is really about using those materials. I really think of it as like creativity cross training. The idea is not now we will all go display our work in a museum, but first of all, just healing that connection to that deep part of ourselves that was probably very harmed in childhood, maybe even by well-meaning adults, and reclaiming that power for ourselves, right?
Hmm.
If you really think about it, a piece of paper is a very low stakes. You can recycle it, you can compost it, you can throw it away. And yet there's so much there that brings up this resistance. And so I think gentleness,
Hmm.
softness, just acknowledging that. And then in Jewish Studio Project, one of the foundational rules, along with follow pleasure, which is like follow the energy, is the no comment rule. so that there is no commenting on your own or anyone else's piece, even and especially to say, oh, I love it. You're such a good artist. And I would venture to say, if you haven't been to Jewish Studio Project, you probably haven't been. It's rare to find any other art space where you're not being commented on, where it's not about the teacher telling you how well you did. And again, there's totally space for critique and learning certain art forms, but I think we also need space to be with materials in a way that is just about listening to our own intuition and following that impulse, as opposed to trying to please the teacher or our fellow students. And I think, that famous quote that's attributed to Einstein that consciousness, can only be transformed from a different level of consciousness, not by from what we've already done. And I think we need to be able to open up to new ways of doing
Mhm.
things, which actually
Mhm.
becomes impossible if we're constantly reinforcing a specific status quo. So I like creating a space where people can get messy and like not know what's going to come out on the page. And then you can be delighted, surprised, you can learn something new is really the point. And the other thing I would say is having the witness writing practice, the writing and response, I think for me takes pressure off of the piece itself as being the end, goal, but makes it more of a cyclical process of creating, learning from what arose for me, going back and like, right, so that the piece isn't like the be all end all end product.
Mhm.
I don't know if any of those things help, but
Yeah,
no comment. I
totally.
certainly invite.
Yeah, no, all good. It's all really helpful. And so we're at time, sadly, because could have a lot to talk about here, but I'd love to have you back, of course. And we'll give people an opportunity to prep a little bit more. And I see a lot of wonderful endorsements in the chat for JSP and what they're doing. So please, what you're doing. So please check it out, the website, also Rabbi Adina's book. Highly, highly recommend. And we'll look forward to next time you're with us, Rabbi Adina Allen. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, IJS. Thank you, everybody. It was wonderful to be with you. May we have a blessed day.
Yes. And early Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Hope to see you tomorrow to sit into Shabbat with Rabbi Susan Leiter, everyone. Thanks to Harry and to each and every one of you for being here. Many blessings to you all. Take good care. Bye.